Have you ever stopped to think that, like, your brain isn't just this thing in your head? I mean, it's like, it's really the organ of your personality, it's your character, your intelligence, and, like, every single decision you make comes from that.
It really is pretty incredible.
It's wild. And here's a thought. What if changing your brain could, like, literally change every single thing about your life?
Hmm.
Welcome to the deep dive where we take fascinating ideas and break them down, make them instantly understandable. Today, we are diving deep into some material that you shared,
Yes.
all focus on this incredible power we have to, like, transform ourselves personally
Right.
and how our minds can actually reshape our reality.
Exactly. The source material for this deep dive is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it really drills down into how our brains and bodies get locked into certain patterns, thinking, feeling, behaving, almost like they're on autopilot. But the really empowering part is that it also lays out how we can break free from those deeply grooved habits to create a new self and, by extension, a new life experience.
Yeah. What grabbed me right away about the author was his background. He's got this extensive background in brain imaging, specifically with SEP-BT scans.
Right.
And so think of those as scans that show where blood is flowing in the brain, highlighting activity levels in different areas.
Okay.
With over 2 decades of experience looking at these, he's seen firsthand the profound impact our brains have on everything we do. And after his first book, which was all about the science of changing the mind, this one is all about the practical how-to. It's like he's saying, okay, you understand the why, now let's get to the actionable steps.
Right.
And for you, our listener, who wants to, like, get up to speed quickly but also thoroughly, this deep dive is specifically designed to deliver those aha moments without leaving you feeling lost or overwhelmed. We've structured this so it's clear, it's engaging, and it's completely relevant to your own journey of growth.
Absolutely. So what's our roadmap for this exploration?
Well, we're going to be unpacking the author's model for personal transformation. We'll start with a really crucial concept: how we can learn to move beyond the limitations of our immediate surroundings, the sensations and restrictions of our physical bodies, even an conventional understanding of time.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of going beyond environment, body, and time. It might sound a little abstract at first, but the book really brings it down to earth. The author even shares a really personal story about growing up with an abusive brother and how that constant stress and fear literally wired his brain for anxiety. It's a powerful illustration of how our external world can deeply shape our internal state. But the crucial insight here is not just acknowledging that, but understanding how we can learn to not let those past external factors continue to dictate our present thoughts and feelings. What's fascinating here is the distinction the author makes between living in what he terms survival mode versus creation mode. Think of survival mode as when you're under constant stress. Your focus narrows to the external world, almost like believing that only what you can see and touch is truly real. It's that fight or flight response kicking in a surge of stress hormones and a feeling of being constantly rushed and overwhelmed by the immediate.
Right.
Your physical comfort, your possessions, your problems, and that nagging sense of not having enough time.
Yeah,
In this state, your brain and body are often working against each other.
right. It's a very reactive way of being. But then there's this creation state, which sounds much more empowering. Tell us more about that.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the creation state is where we begin to transcend those perceived limitations. The physical body, our immediate surroundings, and our linear experience of time. It's about tapping into a more fundamental level of awareness, almost like pure consciousness. It's a state of greater harmony, where your mind and body are working together seamlessly. A key indicator of shifting into this mode is when you start to feel as if a potential future reality is already unfolding in the present moment simply by the power of your focused attention.
Yeah.
That's when you begin to rewire those automatic habits and subconscious programs.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The book then dives into the perspective of quantum physics. Now, for those who haven't delved into this, think of it this way. Reality isn't just made up of solid stuff. At its most fundamental level, it's primarily energy and information. And here's the kicker. As conscious observers, that's you listening and us having this conversation, we're actually influencing this underlying energy to bring about our physical experiences.
Right.
This idea of being interconnected within a unified field of information that exists beyond our conventional understanding of space and time is truly mind-expanding.
It certainly is. And the author brings in some really thought-provoking examples to illustrate this.
Yeah.
Do you recall that experiment by Dr. Leonard Lipovitsky looking at the impact of prayer on patients who had already been hospitalized years prior?
Yeah.
The fact that those patients who were prayed for after the fact showed statistically significant improvement suggests that our intentions, our focused thoughts and feelings, might have a far greater reach than we typically consider, potentially influencing not just the present, but perhaps even the past and the future in ways we don't fully understand.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If we consciously direct our intentions toward a better life, could that have a ripple effect beyond our immediate present? The author then connects this to the power of combining intention with emotion, referencing the research from the HeartMath Institute. That experiment, where a clear intention coupled with an elevated emotion actually caused DNA molecules to unwind, is just incredible. It really highlights that for this quantum creation to work, our thoughts and our feelings need to be in alignment.
Exactly. A thought acting as an intention needs that energizing force, that catalyst to become reality. And that catalyst is an elevated emotion. The heart and mind working in unison, sending out a powerful and coherent signal. It's not just about intellectualizing what you want or simply wishing for it. The intellectual intention needs to be charged with genuine feeling. They need to be on the same emotional frequency.
And the book takes it even further, introducing this concept of a universal intelligence that's inherent in this quantum field. Think of it as the underlying intelligence that organizes energy into the matter that makes up our world, the force that keeps our hearts beating and our bodies functioning without us even consciously thinking about it. The implication here is profound. By consciously aligning ourselves with this universal intelligence, we essentially become active co-creators of our reality.
This raises a really important question. If this universal intelligence is constantly at work organizing and sustaining life at every level, then by intentionally aligning our own consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, and our intentions with this fundamental intelligence, aren't we essentially tapping into an incredibly potent force for positive change and creation in our own lives?
Okay, so we've explored this new model of reality where we're all interconnected at a quantum level, where our intentions and emotions carry real weight, and where there's this underlying universal intelligence orchestrating everything. Now let's get practical. How do we actually break free from what the book calls the habit of being ourselves?
This is where we delve into what the author describes as the mind-body loop.
Mm.
He explains how our thoughts initiate biochemical reactions within the brain. These reactions then release chemical messengers that travel throughout the body, triggering corresponding feelings. These feelings, in turn, send feedback signals back to the brain, which then reinforces the original thought pattern. It becomes this self-sustaining cycle, almost like a record stuck on repeat.
It's like that idea of memorized suffering. If you've gone through a painful experience and you keep replaying it in your mind, you're not just thinking about the event intellectually, you're actually re-experiencing it on a biochemical level. Your body remembers the feeling, and that feeling then influences your subsequent thoughts, creating this closed loop that can really define your personality over time. And the really eye-opening part is that only about 5% of our mind operates consciously. The vast majority, around 95%, runs on these deeply ingrained subconscious automatic programs.
What's absolutely crucial to grasp is that the body itself can essentially become the unconscious mind. Through repeated emotional experiences, the body memorizes these patterns at a cellular level, leading to automatic, often unconscious reactions that can completely undermine our conscious efforts to change. So you might intellectually desire to be happier or more confident, but if your body has been conditioned to chronic anxiety or self-doubt for years, it will tend to default back to those familiar states.
Which leads to a really important point. Simply engaging in positive thinking on a superficial level often isn't enough to create lasting change. You can't just paste a positive affirmation over years of deeply entrenched negative emotional states that are physically held within the body and expect those old patterns to magically disappear.
Right.
There's a much deeper level of reprogramming that needs to occur.
Precisely. And this is where the groundbreaking field of epigenetics comes into play. Epigenetics demonstrates how our environment, and this includes our thoughts, our feelings, and our lifestyle choices, actually has the power to control the activity of our genes. This really challenges the older, more deterministic view of genetics, the idea that our genes are a fixed and unchangeable destiny. Think of your genes as a blueprint and epigenetics as the foreman on a construction site, deciding which parts of that blueprint are actually built based on the signals it receives from the environment, both internal and external.
The book highlights the classic example of identical twins who share the exact same genetic code but can develop drastically different health outcomes over their lifetimes.
It's exactly.
Or that fascinating Japanese study where something as seemingly simple as laughter was shown to positively affect gene expression in patients with diabetes. It really underscores the fact that we are not simply passive recipients of our genetic inheritance. We have a significant say in how those genes express themselves.
Exactly. Epigenetics suggests that we are constantly sending signals to our genes through our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, essentially instructing them and potentially even rewriting our future on a cellular level. This offers a tremendous sense of agency and possibility for personal transformation.
Okay, moving on to part 3, transcending these three greats: environment, body, and time. We've touched on each of these individually, but how do they really intertwine in our experience?
The author uses the concept of flow states as powerful examples of this kind of transcendence. Think about those moments when you're so completely absorbed in an activity, perhaps a creative endeavor, a challenging problem you're trying to solve, or even just a moment of deep presence, that your awareness of your immediate surroundings seems to fade away. You become less aware of your physical sensations or discomforts, and even your perception of time seems to warp or disappear entirely.
I can definitely relate to that. When you're truly in the zone, focused and engaged, time just seems to melt away. But the book also talks about the negative side of this, the significant energy drain that comes from constantly experiencing survival emotions.
Yes. Continuously triggering the body's stress response through those survival emotions like fear, anger, and guilt consumes a tremendous amount of vital energy, energy that's fundamentally needed for maintaining internal balance, for facilitating healing processes, and for potentially preventing the manifestation of our so-called genetic destiny, those predispositions to certain illnesses. These lower frequency survival emotions stand in stark contrast to the higher frequency elevated emotions like love, joy, and gratitude, which have a very different energetic impact on our system.
And the ego plays a role here as well, right? The idea that we can actually become, in a way, addicted to these very survival emotions that are causing us stress.
What's particularly insightful is how we can unconsciously become attached or even addicted to these negative emotions because they paradoxically reinforce our sense of identity,
Right.
even if it's a negative or a limiting one.
Right.
They become familiar, and the ego, in its attempt to maintain a sense of self, can actually cling to these patterns, preventing us from resolving the very issues that are causing the underlying stress.
The book shares Pamela's story as a compelling example of how consciously releasing these long-held negative emotions can liberate a significant amount of energy, paving the way for profound positive change. It also touches on how advertising often cleverly exploits this underlying feeling of lack within us, constantly suggesting that we need something external to finally feel complete or happy.
That's a really key point to recognize.
Yeah.
We often seek external validation, trying to fill an internal void with material possessions, fleeting relationships, or external achievements. The author even shares his own personal experience of feeling surprisingly empty despite achieving outward success, realizing that his sense of happiness had become overly dependent on external stimuli and the constant need to be perceived in a certain way. The real and lasting key is to cultivate an inner sense of happiness and fulfillment that isn't contingent on those ever-changing external factors.
This naturally leads us to part 4 and the concept of the three brains: thinking, doing, and being. Can you explain how these three aspects work together in the context of personal change?
The author outlines 3 distinct centers of intelligence within us. The neocortex, which is responsible for higher-level thinking and analysis, the limbic brain, which is the seat of our emotions and feelings, and the cerebellum, which is largely involved in our automatic movements, habits, and learned behaviors, the doing part. Creating a new habit of being, a new way of showing up in the world, fundamentally requires aligning the mind's conscious intention, originating in the neocortex, with the body's emotional responses processed in the limbic brain, so that the cerebellum responsible for our automatic actions naturally follows suit, embodying the new pattern.
So it's not just about intellectually deciding to think differently, but also about experiencing and feeling those desired changes so that our habitual actions naturally shift to reflect that new state of being.
Right.
And it sounds like new experiences and the emotions they evoke play a really critical role in this alignment process.
Absolutely. When we have new experiences, they generate new emotions within us. And these emotions act as powerful signals to the body, instructing it to store the memory of that event chemically. This is essentially how we embody learning and integrate new ways of being. And the frontal lobe, that more evolved executive functioning part of our brain, becomes absolutely essential in consciously choosing not to react with those old, ingrained automatic programs. It's about intentionally reflecting on who you no longer want to be and consciously deciding in each moment who you want to become.
And all of this, in a way, circles back to that idea of sending a coherent signal, a harmonious alignment, our thoughts and feelings, out to that quantum field we discussed earlier to create different outcomes in our lives, moving beyond that more simplistic Newtonian model of cause and effect that's solely driven by external circumstances.
Precisely. It's about shifting from being primarily reactive to the external world to becoming the active creator of your own internal and external reality.
Now, part 5 delves into this concept of the void and the path to creation.
Mm.
This sounds a little mysterious, almost like a transitional space. What is that about?
The void in this context refers to that often uncomfortable and uncertain space that can arise when we actively begin doing the inner work of personal transformation. When we start to confront our deeply held feelings and consciously break free from those old, familiar emotional attachments and patterns, it can feel unsettling, like a loss of identity. And it might even create challenges in our existing relationships, particularly if those relationships were built on shared negative emotions or unhealthy dynamics.
That makes a lot of sense. Change, even positive change, can be inherently disruptive, not just within ourselves, but also in our connections with others. And the book also talks about how we often try to avoid this feeling of emptiness or uncertainty by seeking external fixes, whether it's constantly engaging with technology, indulging in substances, or chasing after new experiences, which unfortunately only creates a cycle of dependence and prevents us from truly addressing the underlying void.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We can become almost addicted to these external distractions as a way to numb or avoid that inner emptiness. But the real transformative power emerges when we reach that critical enough is enough moment,
Right.
where we become so tired of the old patterns and the associated suffering that we make a deep, unwavering commitment to change, regardless of the external circumstances, any initial physical discomfort or the perceived length of time it might take.
It's like that powerful analogy of being trapped between two restrictive walls. By consciously choosing to let go of those old limiting patterns, even though it might initially feel like stepping into an empty space, the void, we actually free up the very energy that was being used to hold those walls in place. This newfound energy then becomes available for us to step out and actively create a whole new reality. The old familiar room of our past essentially collapses, and we gain access to a universe of new possibilities. And as the book emphasizes, the practice of meditation becomes a really key tool in navigating this process.
Precisely. Meditation, as the author presented, is not about emptying your mind, but rather about developing the capacity to observe your unconscious thoughts, feelings, and ingrained behaviors without judgment. This creates a crucial distance from our old habitual identity, giving us more conscious control and the ability to make different choices. And the core of the personal change process, as he outlines it, involves intentionally remembering who you no longer want to be, clearly contemplating and defining who you genuinely desire to become, and then actively training your body on an emotional level to align with this new, consciously chosen mind.
It's like cultivating a new mind is very much akin to tending a garden. You first have to diligently clear out the old weeds, those persistent past thoughts, ingrained behaviors, and lingering negative emotions before you can even begin to plant the new seeds of who you want to be and nurture their growth. And the book even delves into the different brainwave states and how consistent meditation practice helps us to gradually shift from those higher beta brainwave frequencies, which are typically associated with stress anxiety, and a primary focus on the external world, down to the calmer alpha and even deeper theta brainwave states. These slower frequencies are more conducive to relaxation, accessing the subconscious mind, and facilitating that deep inner work of rewiring our neural pathways.
What's really significant is that regular meditation promotes the development of more coherent brainwave patterns, a state of greater balance and synchronization across different areas of the brain, as opposed to the more chaotic and scattered, incoherent patterns that are often associated with stress and mental overwhelm. This state of brainwave coherence is not only ideal for promoting physical and emotional healing, but also for enhancing our capacity for creativity and conscious creation. And the author provides specific progressive steps in this meditation process, including induction, recognizing old patterns, observing and remembering the unwanted self, redirecting thoughts and feelings, and actively beating. Creating and rehearsing the new selves, suggesting that consistent practice essentially builds a new neural network, specifically designed for meditation and conscious change.
Finally, part 6 brings it all together, focusing on actively creating your new future. It revisits some of those key meditation steps, particularly observe and remember, where you really cultivate a heightened awareness of the unconscious thoughts and habitual actions of your old self, consciously bringing to mind who you no longer want to be, and in doing so, beginning to truly detach from the pull of the past.
And then redirect is that crucial conscious act of intentionally interrupting those old automatic programs the moment they arise and actively choosing to respond with new, more positive and constructive thoughts and behaviors, especially when faced with familiar triggers. It's about reclaiming your agency in those pivotal moments.
And create and rehearse is where you actively engage your imagination to vividly envision and mentally rehearse the desired thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of your new emerging self. And crucially, doing so while cultivating an elevated emotional state. It's about truly feeling the options of that desired future in the present moment, fully embodying that new identity from the inside out.
The ultimate aim the book suggests is to learn to live and operate from a fundamental state of wholeness, of deep inner fullness, and unconditional self-acceptance and love. When that persistent feeling of lack or inadequacy is replaced by a profound sense of inherent completeness, you essentially become one with the creative force of the universe, and your desires and intentions can begin to manifest with greater ease and flow.
And so it seems the true purpose of this journey isn't about relentlessly chasing external validation or constantly trying to acquire more, but rather about consciously removing the masks and limiting beliefs that prevent that inherent universal intelligence from flowing freely through us, ultimately recognizing and embracing our innate capacity as powerful, multidimensional creators of our own individual reality.
What's truly transformative is that when you genuinely reach this inner state of fullness and self-sufficiency, you may even find that the intense craving for those external desires begins to diminish, replaced by a deep and abiding sense of inner peace and coherence.
So as we bring this incredibly insightful deep dive to a close, what would you say are some of the most crucial key takeaways for you, our listener, to really hold on to?
Well, first and foremost, it's the profound understanding that your thoughts and your feelings are not simply passive experiences that happen to you, but rather incredibly active and potent forces that are constantly shaping your brain, your body, at a cellular level, and even the very fabric of reality, as we understand it, at a quantum level.
Absolutely. And this deep dive has really illuminated the immense power of conscious awareness and the practical, accessible tools of meditation to help you break free from those deeply ingrained habits and step confidently into a new, consciously designed future of your own making.
And perhaps most importantly, remember that true and lasting transformation doesn't originate from constantly trying to manipulate or control the external world around you, but rather from committing to a deep and ongoing transformation of your own inner state, of being your core thoughts, your habitual feelings, and ultimately your fundamental sense of identity.
Here's a provocative thought for you to really sit with and consider. If you truly and fully accepted that you are a multidimensional being with the inherent capacity to consciously create your own reality, what is one seemingly uncommon, or perhaps even a little bit audacious thing that you would dare to do differently starting today?
This deep dive has offered you a glimpse into the immense power that resides within you. The ongoing journey of consciously creating your reality now continues guided by your own awareness and intention.